What's up, my dudes? Welcome back to the channel. My name's Junbray, but you already know that. We've got lots and lots of powerful and exciting cards to talk about, which were just revealed over the past couple of days. So let's get into it. First card, neutral Zoldrak Ritualist. This is a 4-mana 3/9 taunt. Battlecry summon 3 random 1-cost minions for your opponent. We've had similar cards to this in the past, and generally they've been quite bad. Things like Hungry Dragon, for example. Just pretty much unplayable. This card does have a couple of things going for it. First of all, it's got big stats for the mana cost. If you can somehow combo this with an AoE or cheat into play, it's potentially good in that sense. Not too many good options for cheating this card out in standard right now, however. Your average random 1-cost card is going to have 1 attack. So if we do all the trades and simulate them, comes down basically as a 4-mana 3/6. But that's not going to happen a lot of the time. If you just play this on curve, your opponent's going to have things like hard removal to super punish you for it, or other ways to trade up their minions or take value trades, for instance, which is going to mean they're going to come out ahead, even though if it were in a vacuum, this card is kind of like a 4-mana 3/6. If this card's to see any play, I think it would basically be as a hate card against some sort of Resurrect Priest deck, and that's not going to be too likely, so I expect this card not to be very, very good, and probably won't see much play at all. Next, Chromatic Egg. You know I love eggs, guys. 5-mana 0/3. Battlecry, secretly discover a dragon to hatch into. Death Rattle, hatch. So, I saw someone do the maths on this card, and I think it was something like 90% of the time you get to discover a 6/6 or better, and it was around, I think, 75% of the time you get an 8/8 or better. So comparing this to Mechano Egg in Paladin, which is a 0/5 that summons an 8/8 on Death Rattle, you know, this one's probably a little bit worse of an effect most of the time. Obviously you can high roll as well, and this thing suffers a little bit compared to Mechano Egg in other areas, in that Mechano Egg, you can magnetize onto it, because it was a mech, and it came back with Kangor's Endless Army. And you can't really have those synergies with Chromatic Egg. The only real clear synergies available I can see are in Rogue, where you can activate the Death Rattle via things like Necreon Blade. However, if you wanted to play this in Rogue, Rogue just got access to a very, very powerful 4-drop in the 4-mana 2/5. So this card does come with the Death Rattle, which will affect the Necreon Apothecary. It's basically going to give Necreon Apothecary the Death Rattle hatch, but without the Battlecry part of the card, that hatch Death Rattle won't actually do anything, I don't think. So you don't want to be running the egg in a deck with Necreon Apothecary, and if you're running Death Rattle Rogue, you definitely want to be running Apothecary. So this card doesn't fit in its strongest neutral synergy. So it's really hard to find a home for Chromatic Egg, when usually it's going to be worse than Mechano Egg, and there's really not many ways to abuse it in the neutral set right now. Next we have Dragon Breeder. This is a 2-mana 2/3. Battlecry, choose a friendly dragon, add a copy of it to your hand. So it's like Zola, but for 2 mana, but only can hit dragons, and it's got better stats. So pretty good card, to be honest. Like, a 2-mana 2/3 doesn't need too much to have it be a good card. With the Battlecry, choose a friendly dragon, add a copy of it to your hand. There's some specific dragons you might want to abuse this on. Namely, in Priest, their new dragon, the 4-mana 3/6, that reduces the cost of minions in your hand. Basically, if you play that, then the Dragon Breeder is going to cost 1 mana anyway, and then you get another dragon back to your hand, which you can then discount your hand further. So it's fairly abusable in that sense. Seems like a good target, and otherwise, other Battlecry effects like the Warlock Hellfire Dragon, for instance, are also quite strong with this card. So this card never works on turn 2, it's just a River Croc, but later in the game it's going to get you a lot of value, which might make it worth using as a card. And compared to Zola, it's cheaper, it has better stats. While Zola was a good card, it was specifically used in combo style decks for the most part. Things like Questro had to use it, for instance. Things like Shadowwalk Shaman. They're all going towards combos. Dragon Breeder doesn't quite have to go the same combo route because it's a bit more acceptable just as a standalone minion. But you're usually going to be wanting to target specific dragons with this card. Next up, big legendary, Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. 9 mana, 8/8. Battlecry, if your deck has no duplicates, add 2 random dragons to your hand and they cost 0. So, more love towards Reno style decks. Certainly a very powerful late game bomb. Adds the dragons to your hands. You don't actually have to play them. You can potentially combo them if that's something you want to do. But most of the time, it's just going to be a bunch of stats on turn 9. And most dragons, they aren't actually too defensive, so it could be hard to play Dragon Queen Alexstrasza if you're under a lot of pressure. Might be a bit of a YOLO attempt at getting yourself out sometimes. And it's going to work some of the time because there are taunts, there are things like Deathwing, there's Alexstrasza as well, to potentially give you life gain that way. But for the vast majority of the time, Dragon Queen Alexstrasza is going to be a huge dump of stats onto the board, and it's very, very, very good tempo. So if you can drop this thing down on turn 9, it's going to be very good most of the time. I'm a little bit upset with this card because the variance on it is incredibly high. Like, you can discover herself from this card and essentially give yourself an extra 2 dragons for free, which seems pretty crazy to me. Although it is a lot of stats, it is a 9 mana card, which doesn't always have immediate impact on the board. So it is actually quite hard to play, even in Reno style decks some of the time. Certainly very powerful in things like Reno Mage, where they can run Luna's Pocket Galaxy, and then you're not having to pay the full 9 mana for this card. You could also run this card in a Minion Light Reno Hunter build. We've seen in the past fringe playability from almost minionless Reno Hunters, which run Geppetto and Malygos as a finisher. So Dragon Queen Alexstrasza is another great hit to get off your Geppetto, because there's going to be just huge amounts of tempo in that sort of deck. Overall, fairly strong card. It is certainly very late in the game it comes down, and often doesn't give you anything defensive when you do play it. Kind of a bit like King Phaeorus in a way, although you don't have to have all the spells in hand as a requirement. Probably in most Reno decks, or it might push out Reno decks that can't run this out of the meta game and have just the Reno decks that are playable, ones that can afford to run Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. In Paladin, we got a new side quest, Sanctuary, and the side quest is take no damage for a turn, and the reward is summon a 3/6 minion with taunt. So if you do manage to fulfill this requirement, the 3/6 taunt that comes down isn't going to be able to attack. So it's very, very slow stats in the sense that even if you do trigger it in the shortest amount of time you can, you're still going to have to wait an extra turn for that 3/6 minion to be able to attack. But luckily it has taunt, so the stats are immediately impactful in at least a certain way. How hard is it to activate this side quest though? If you're spending 2 mana early on to essentially do nothing immediately to the board, you're on average going to be behind on board, at least in immediacy. So if you're behind on board, it stands to reason that your opponent is quite likely to be able to forego killing your minions and at least send some damage to your face to prevent this Sanctuary. There are a lot of scenarios where Sanctuary can actually come down super early in the game. Even against an aggro deck, they're going to miss their 1-drop a certain amount of the time. And if you're going second, you can just coin out Sanctuary on turn 1. And if they're not a ping class, or even if they are a ping class, they might have to choose between developing a 2-drop or using their hero power to just ping your face to prevent Sanctuary from coming down. Use 2 mana on a Sanctuary, and you've basically forced your opponent to waste their 2 mana turn on just a hero power. Well, it's kind of a win in that sense, because any turn beyond that, your opponent's still going to be in position where they need to keep damaging your face, but they haven't got that development to do it for free. So I wouldn't be surprised if Sanctuary puts people in very annoying spots. And basically, long term, they might be forced into a scenario where they have to let Sanctuary proc. The downside of Sanctuary is when you're behind on board, and it basically does nothing because your opponent's always going to be able to send some damage towards your face. You can guarantee Sanctuary proccing if you use the card Timeout, although historically Timeout has only really been used in Shivala style combo decks, where Sanctuary itself, outside of the use of Timeout, is probably not going to be proccing very often, because as the Shivala Paladin, you're very, very often behind on board and taking at least a little bit of chip damage every single turn. So although Timeout and Sanctuary have good synergy together, the overall deck that Timeout appears in and the overall deck that Sanctuary appears in are likely going to be very different from each other. Super interesting card, potentially really annoying card, and potentially very, very strong card in certain meta games. If opponent doesn't play 1-drops, this card gets way, way better. Yeah, could see this card getting played. Depends on the meta game, I'd say. On to Rogue, and they got a powerhouse. 6 mana 4/4, Flick Sky Shiv. Battlecry, destroy a minion, and all copies of it wherever they are. So this card is really good, I think. I mean, it's just efficient removal on its own if we just ignore the destroy all copies of it. 6 mana for 4/4, destroy a minion. You know, if you look at the classic set, Black Knight is in there, and that's a 6 mana 4/5 with a specific target on a taunt. But when you do hit that taunt, it's usually a very, very good card. If you ever get off Zephyrus, for instance, and you manage to get a good Black Knight off of it, it's usually a really, really good play. So you lose 1 health on a Black Knight in exchange for being able to hit anything. Seems like a really good compromise to me. On top of that, you get the effect where it destroys all copies of minions. Now, that's going to allow you to discard opponents' cards from their hand a lot of the time, because a lot of decks are running 2 copies of their most powerful minions. If you're against something like Druid, this is very, very good against Oasis Surger, because it kills both copies of them, and it prevents the opponent from playing further Oasis Surgers from their deck, which is one of their most powerful catch-up tools once they've completed the quest. So Flick can really shut that down. On top of that, if they're playing Floop in their deck, which copies the last minion that they played, if you use Flick on the last minion that they played, I'm pretty sure it will also destroy the Floop in their hand as well. Things like Soul of the Murloc, Soul of the Forest get really hard countered by Flick Sky Shiv. My boy Harik the Bat strays further and further from playability once Flick enters the metagame. And after all that speaking I didn't even compare it to the most obvious comparison, which is Vileswine Slayer, which is the 5 mana 3/4, which has combo destroy a minion. And that card is very, very good. This is 1 mana more expensive, but you don't have to activate that combo, which often did get activated for 1 mana. So the destroy a minion effect plus bodies tended to cost around 6 mana a lot of the time anyway. The only downside really is you don't really get that coin Vilespine Slayer tempo, or that backstab Vilespine Slayer tempo anymore. But still a really strong card, I think. And if dragons are going to be meta, dragons themselves, a lot of the value in the card comes in the body that it provides, and it's not really from a battle cry. So Flick's going to provide a lot of value by being able to just destroy those stats straight away. Super good card, I think. You'll see a lot of play in many different rogue archetypes. Next up, a couple of Warlock cards. First of which is a Bissel Summoner. This is 6 mana 2/2 Battlecry. Summon a demon with taunt and stats equal to your hand size. Now this is fairly similar to the card Astromancer and Mage, which tended to be actually a pretty good card, I'd say. The initial body on this is going to be worse than the body that Astromancer provides, but I think the back end body is usually going to be a bit stronger on this minion, and this minion's cheaper, and the minion you get has taunt, so all pluses there. And you're in Warlock. Now, it wasn't too hard for Mage to have a big hand size with things like Twin Spell, with Arcane Intellect, etc. So, although it wasn't hard to get a big hand size as Mage, it's a little bit easier in Warlock because you do have that life tap hero power. Handlock decks recently haven't been too great, but this card definitely bolsters them. I think it's a pretty good card in general. One downside to this card, which might actually be relevant, is the fact that it summons a demon. And with Zephyrus decks being so rampant already, and with the announcement of the new Highlander card, Alexstrasza, I expect they're not going to be going away anytime soon. So a world where the opponent can generate a Sacrificial Pact and delete your 6-drop and heal for 5 for just 0 mana, it seems potentially disastrous for the Abyssal Summoner. Although I do think the card itself in a vacuum, within the Handlock archetype, is pretty good. Next up, Valdrist Felgorge. 7 mana 4/4. Battlecry, increase your maximum hand size to 12. Draw 4 cards. RIP mobile users. So the increasing hand size to 12, when is that relevant? Things like Twilight Drake, things like Mountain Giant all get better from this card. Things like Abyssal Summoner, which we just talked about, get better from this card. But in addition to that, you don't have to dump your hand size before you can play this card. You can have 8 cards in hand and still play Valdrist Felgorge without immediately overdrawing, which is a small benefit. How good is the effect outside of increasing your hand size to 12 though? How good is a 7 mana 4/4 that draws 4 cards? Now it looks really, really good, right? If you compare it to things like Ancient of Lore, which was a 7 mana 5/5 that draw 2 cards, and that card got nerfed because it was too strong. Back in Classic though, it might not be too strong right now. You look at things like Sprint, which is a 7 mana spell that draws 4 cards. Well, this comes with a body as well, which is certainly better. But there's caveats to that. But there are specific reasons why those cards saw play sometimes in the past. For the Ancient of Lore, Druid had access to a 2 mana Wild Growth, and they had access to Innovate for 2 mana, which were big reads, and they also had access to Force of Nature Savage Roar combo back then. And they were also not facing against the power crept metagame that we're in now. So although this card in a vacuum is better than an Ancient of Lore, in the context that this card is in a power crept metagame right now, we don't have access to Innovate in Warlock, we don't have access to Wild Growth in Warlock. Valdrist is starting to look way worse in that scenario. Rogue with Sprint, it's not a card that has seen a lot of play in Rogue, to be honest. Even back in Classic, Gadget and Auctioneer was a more attractive option. And the metagames that Sprint has seen play in, it's with a pre-nerf preparation. So it would often come down for 4 mana. Or when you played the Sprint, you could do something like Prep Eviscerate or Prep Sap with it, and you wouldn't lose as much tempo. If we compare Valdrist to some card draw cards that have seen play recently or not seen play recently, we can compare it to Druid cards. Overflow, for instance. Big hyped up card, people thought it was going to be really, really good. But in practice, it was just too bad in tempo, and Valdrist might suffer from the same circumstances. Things like Juicy Psychomelon. Again, 4 mana version that potentially draw you 4 cards, but tempo-wise, it's just too slow. Now, the cards you're going to get off Valdrist are probably going to be a bit higher tempo than just 7, 8, 9, 10 drops. We could also look at Myra's Unstable Element in Rogue, which is a 5 mana card, which very often drew you more than 4 cards, I'd say. And that card doesn't actually see a whole lot of play anymore. It did see play in the past when you could prep it out for just 2 mana, but that is a huge disparity in mana cost compared to Valdrist. And Rogue had access to being more of an aggressive deck and had way better combo finishes and stuff like Leroy Shadowstep, Waggle Pick, so much burst damage available in that deck where Warlock doesn't really have access to them. In fact, in terms of tempo tools, Warlock is a lot slower, a lot more honest with how they play their mana cost. They can't play things for 0 mana as effectively as a Rogue. And Valdrist itself is more expensive than Rogue's card draw options, and the cards you draw from it tend to be worse tempo. So in my mind, Valdrist itself is too slow of a card to be that good. Now you could argue we want to play it in Zoo Warlock to potentially have it as your top end as a refill sort of card if you're running out of gas. But you already have things like Solarium which might fill that role a little bit better. As flashy as Valdrist is, I kind of think the card isn't very good and is perhaps a little bit of a trap card. I mean, playing this on turn 8, filling your hand size to 12, and then playing a 1 mana Mountain Giant alongside it sounds pretty appealing, but it's not going to happen that often. And even if it does, you're not given anything torn. You might just die in that sort of scenario. And for Mage, we have Shenvala, 3 mana, 2/5. After you cast 3 spells in a turn, summon a 5/5 elemental. So same card text as Dragon Soul, which was a legendary weapon for Priest back in the day, which ended up seeing 0 play whatsoever. There's a few reasons why I think this card is quite a lot better than Dragon Soul, even though they cost the same mana cost. Number 1, you get a 2/5 body with it, which is just fine on turn 3. And number 2, I think Mage has way easier of a time right now casting multiple spells a turn than Priest did back then. Even though Priest did have access to Radiant Elemental and Shadow Visions back then, cards like Magic Trick and Ray of Frost cost 0 mana, whereas like Shadow Visions will at best cost 1 mana really when you play a Radiant alongside it. So I think Shenvala is going to be way easier to activate in Mage. The 2/5 body itself is very good in that on turn 3, it's quite hard to efficiently deal 5 damage at that stage of the game. And the 2 attack is going to be able to trade well into a lot of 1-drops a lot of the time. And the card itself is a threat, which is really nice for a card which has good stats, because your opponent is going to be at a disadvantage if they try to remove it early on, because they're not going to be able to do so efficiently. Your opponent would much rather, on their turn 4, develop just a minion like with good stats. But if instead they have to use like a 3-cost removal plus a minion on board, that's not going to be very efficient. And Shenvala is basically going to get value out of just being a threat, because if they leave it up, suddenly you can pop off with things like Ray of Frost, freeze their 4-drop, and then make a 5/5 of your own and potentially threaten to do it again on the next turn, and things are starting to look a little bit bad. So to have a 3 mana 2/5 which is a threat, even if you don't activate the 5/5, it's going to generate value out of itself. Shenvala does find a home. You're going to be playing it on turn 3 a lot of the time in these tempo style matchups, and just kind of hoping it lives. Yes, against something like Control Warrior, you probably don't want to be doing that. You probably want to be comboing it most of the time, although sometimes, especially if you're going first, just dropping it on turn 3 seems absolutely fine. So yeah, Ray of Frost, Magic Trick, potentially Shooting Star to go along with the new Spell Damage Dragon that was revealed. Kind of looking at a deck with Shenvala as certainly a possibility in it. Can kind of compare it to Flamewaker. Flamewaker has been in the metagame recently, and potential usage in Giants Mage. I would say that a 5/5 is usually going to be better than 3 random pings, although you can activate Flamewaker for just the once or the twice without having to cast 3 spells in a turn. Overall, I think this is a okay card. Might surprise you that it's stronger than it initially looks. Okay, that's almost all of the cards released in the past couple of days. I'll go over the leaked Warrior Dragon when that gets released in a few days' time. But for now, stay tuned for more of these videos.